catalyst for change, and the hopefully the SDGs. That's the change that we at the UN are trying to make. But first of all, Nick, you've been a sportsman all your life, a passionate player, a passionate professional in the sporting business. What is so special about sport in terms of bringing people together around a mission and a purpose?
Dan, thanks for having us here, and thank you to the UN and the SDG Media Zone. You know, the interesting thing is, as we think about the SDGs and their context, two of the groups that you really want to reach out to is the corporate world and young people. And of course, sport plays such it's a real shiny thing amongst those two groups specifically. And I think as we have, throughout my career, I've recognized the importance of sport in terms of its self-development and its attributes. But more importantly, we're seeing that, especially in such a fragmented, complex world, how useful it is in bringing people together. And I think that's the crucial thing. And it really reaches out to those two groups, the corporate world and also young people.
And is it just team sports that bring people together, or individual sports as well? How have you seen sport transform people's lives, give them a sense of purpose and community?
Well, we reach out to around 2,700 organizations through Beyond Sport across 140 countries through our awards program that all links into the SDGs. And we can find so many compelling stories of people. And the reality is that whether it be an individual, a community, or a society, sport can have a positive impact, whether it be around education, health, inclusion, and so many of these issues that we're facing, complex issues. Sport can play some defining role around it.
And tell us about how Beyond Sport is connecting the players, the sports, the companies who support sport with the Sustainable Development Goals. Why was that a good match, do you think, for you?
I think when we started off with Beyond Sport, what we recognized is we had to bring the corporate world into the conversation. There were plenty of platforms for NGOs, and meanwhile, lots of conversations were going on in silos, whether it be global governance, whether it is the community, whether it is the corporate teams, leagues. Sport can sometimes play in silos. So we knew as Beyond Sport, we had a very tough job in making sure we drew everyone together under one banner, and I think that's been a really crucial aspect. And if we were told we had a core purpose, it was really around inspiring and offering insight and then creating impact by convening people as well.
This is a very broad agenda, as we know. I mean, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets. It covers sort of pretty much everything that you can imagine. Are there particular goals that resonate most with sports and the world of sport?
Yeah, I'm looking behind me, but for me, sustainable cities and communities, SDG 11 really is where sport, I think, has the most potential to have impact. Of course, you've got reducing inequalities, you've got education, there are others where it plays a part, but where I'm really intrigued is where sport can play a role. As population growth continues in cities, what role can sport play to create harmonious cities and help create more inclusive cities as well?
How interested are the big sporting organizations and sponsors of the world in getting behind this global agenda, this 2030 agenda for sustainable development?
Well, I think, as climate change turned into climate emergency this year, I really do think there's the growing interest. It's really clear that the world of investment is moving, as Larry Fink, is from BlackRock, one of the biggest investors of the world, is talking about purpose. We see a trend around finding a deeper purpose, and I think as that happens, you're seeing brand shift. And if brand shifts, then sports teams have to shift, because the old sponsorship model that funded sport, of course, and media as well, is shifting slightly. It's moving away from hospitality and branding, and it's moving much more towards a more holistic approach to what sponsorship is. How can we use sport for the corporate world to soften itself and to reach out to communities in an authentic way? And what I think is most fundamental, create genuine impact on the ground.
And what does that look like? What does that impact look like for societies, for governance, and for sustainable development? How does it manifest in practice?
I think there's two really interesting things about sport. We can use it as a platform to reach out to hard-to-reach groups, which we've discussed about a little bit at the beginning. Sport really does reach to places where conversations around social issues don't normally go. So I think using sport as a context, as a platform, is really important. And the second piece is authentically working in communities. There is no doubt, and we're going to hear about examples of it in the panel that I'm going to be hosting next, but there's no doubt that sports teams really are the epicenter of some cities, and they reach out to their communities in a very special way. And I think that opportunity is very important. The question is, how do we take, and this is where the UN SDGs and the global governance is so important, how do we take that combination of sports team in a community, the corporation that's putting the money behind it, the brand that's putting the money behind it, and then how do we elevate all that they've learnt in that community, all that insight, all that knowledge? How do we make sure that we can create global impact? And the real way to do it is linking that into global governance and to what we've got here behind us, which is very, very compelling. My word of caution, I suppose, comes from the fact that these are such brilliant this is such brilliant branding that we've got to remember not just to see this as 17 challenges, we've got to continue to see our industries as driving forces behind it. And what we've got to make sure is within industries, within sectors, that they come together. But these are very compelling. And so sometimes I'm thinking, are sectors forgetting to come together to challenge them? And I think our job together is to make sure that sectors are really working with the private sector, the NGOs, the public sector, really coming together to see if they can drive change, because it's the only way we're going to globalize solutions.
Absolutely, and thank you for your partnership. You're partnering with the UN Global Compact. We're partnering with you. There's all sorts of exciting work ahead of it. And so right now I'm going to hand over to Nick, who's got a panel to introduce. Yeah. Thank you for being here, Nick. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Development Goals and for being part of this SDG Media Zone here at the Web Summit, live on UN television. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Dan. Great stuff.